let us go back to the questions. What are the questions at the basis of all this? First of all, we acknowledge that there is meaning. Meaning is an experience. Things have sense. Things make sense. And we can make sense with words, by speaking. We can make sense with gestures. We can make sense with artifacts. Now, what is these common things which is observed in all these modalities or in combination with this modality? And like in all scientific approach, we try to find something general, something which, the science is the discovery of laws, of generalities. Now, when people started to ask questions about what does animals and trees and rocks have in common, then in Greek antiquity they started by proposing the notion of an atom. And then Lucretius later on in Rome created, this beautiful epic poem, scientific poem, De Natura Rerum, with all these atoms, So all the various forms of reality are composed by a single little element. So there is a search for an elementary particle in some ways. Then came people who look at the atom, but the atom was itself composed of other things. And, Niels Bohr had this metaphor of each atom being actually like a little solar system with a sun and planets and so on and so on. And then, of course, it was proved to be completely fantastic. But then there was the quantum approach to it. So there is always a search for a unit, a basic unit whose composition. So exactly the same things happen with the notion of science, when instead of raising the question about the nature of nature, you raise the question of the nature of meaning. And then you look for a unit. So you come with sign, with the notion of sign. The Greek came with the notion of sign, of semeion, and so on and so on. But this is only a model. It's not something that you can put your hands on. It's like the atom. The atom you cannot put. It's a concept. It's a conceptual thing. So you go on. And if you lose sight of the fact that these are tentative models, built in order to try to account for the problems that you want to solve, then when you start to believe in it, when you start to have an ontology, and I keep reading things when people talk about science as if they were natural kinds, as if they were objects of nature. No, the science is a hypothesis. Science is a hypothesis, and I would say a hypothesis by default is because we cannot think of better explanation for what we observe that we come up with that. Exactly like Saussure trying to find out and solve the mystery of language, come up with this idea of la langue. And it's not because he had any evidence. It's simply because he had evidence of particular phenomena. And the only way to explain it was to assume that there was such an abstract system through which every element of what we were observing was mutually in mutual relations so as to form a system. And if you modify one part, then all the rest, follows. So when we try to teach semiotics, I think it is a disservice to our students to teach semiotics as a body, as a dogmatic body of knowledge. We should first of all make them discover the type of questions that we raise, the type of problems that we have when we are confronted to the diversity of, I would say, meaningful behavior, meaningful object, and so on and so on. Now, the great problem in doing so, because it's a big challenge, was raised by Greimas on a very provocative manner, and it is the following. Greimas thought that you could study meaning only as long as it is articulated. And for him, it was articulated in language. It was a form of, in my opinion, a form of Kantism. Immanuel Kant tells us that we cannot have a knowledge of the thing in itself because everything appears to us through the category, a priori category of time and space. Now, Greimas was telling us that you cannot have a direct experience of meaning except if it is articulated fundamentally as a narrative structure. It is a narrative structure. The fundamental semio-narrative structure is a priori form. And then he was raising the question, very explicitly in the preface of Du Sens in French. He says, since we study meaning with a meaningful discourse, we will never be able, in fact, he said, in order to talk about meaning and say something meaningful about it, we would need a meaningless discourse. This, of course, is, in a way, akin to the famous paradox of the incompleteness, the paradox of the names escape me. You see what I mean? I just finished a book on it, but I hope you will be able to edit all that, you know,
No, of course, but the status of semiotics is the problem.
The status,
the meta-status.
Yes. So you see, it's not because...
Is it subjective knowledge? Is it accidental, like I know, I study, a lot of the concepts are vague hypotheses, interdisciplinary guesses, which is nice about it.
But that's what Greimas was calling the apories of semiotics, the aporias of semiotics. That is, you cannot get out. You are blocked at a certain point. You see? I know people will say, but you confuse language and meta-language. I say, yes, of course, but meta-language is also a language. So you have a meta-language. How far can you go? You will always be within a language, and you will be unable within this language to demonstrate the truth of the premises upon which this language is based. So that's why Greimas was, in a way, escaping by saying, my system is axiomatic. I start from axioms. And one day I was writing a report about his school for an encyclopedia or something like that, and I asked him, I said, well, do you think that I can say that your system is based on a number of a prioris? He said, no, he said, don't say a priori, say axioms. Why? It's more scientific, it's more scientific, you see. That was his answer. And I can see why, because then if you say axioms, but that is what? That is evidence for the mind that you cannot question, and from which you develop all these. So there is a lot, if you look at the roots of the semiotics movement as an intellectual movement, and it is a very powerful movement for two reasons, because it raises the most fundamental questions, and secondly, it enables you to I don't want to say to cover, but to transform a great diversity of systems into a single language. Now, if you use it in a reductive manner, and if at the end of the process you say, well, everything is either symbol, index, or icon, what have you done? Nothing. In my opinion, nothing. But if these models allows you to perceive all these systems in a more articulate manner, that is, if it allows you to formulate problems with more precision and to ask questions which are more precise, then it is a plus, And it is absolutely necessary in the epistemological landscape of today. You see, but as long as you don't take one particular stream of thought and prop it up as a dogma, of course, it's always easier to teach a dogma than to teach a problematics.
They're only tools. It's a tool.
Tools. They are tools. They are epistemological tools.
I tell my class, I
Yeah.
will not give you a dogmatic set of tools. I'll give you an eclectic set of tools.
Yes.
You have to make some decision between what I give you.
Exactly, exactly. And you see, this set of tools produced by semiotics to date is excellent, but it addresses the what questions and the how questions. The what question, definitely, it can allow you to describe. The how question, okay, this is a little more touchy because these are brain processes. We know more and more about the brain, but still there is a lot of black box, there is a lot of shadows, etc. But semiotics has not raised the why questions, which is a question that all sciences encounter and through which they make real advances. Because only when you have answered the why questions can you have a form of control on these phenomena.